Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside our window, the early morning sun casting a warm glow across the room. Dylan was still asleep beside me, his arm draped casually over my waist. I gently moved his arm and slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him. My morning routine had become a sanctuary of sorts, a moment of peace before the daily chaos set in. As I made my way to the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from my mother-in-law, Brenda. The mere sight of her name on my screen sent a shiver down my spine. Brenda had never liked me. From the moment Dylan introduced us, she made it clear that I was not the woman she envisioned for her precious son. And despite my efforts to win her over, nothing seemed to change her mind. "Good morning, Lara. Just a reminder that Dylan needs a real breakfast today, not that granola you usually make. He needs something substantial." I sighed and put my phone down, heading to the pantry to gather ingredients for a proper breakfast. Working remotely for a multinational corporation had its perks, but it also meant I was always home, and Brenda took every opportunity to remind me that she thought my job wasn't real work. An hour later, Dylan stumbled into the kitchen, his hair tousled and eyes half closed. He sat at the table, yawning as I placed a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast in front of him. "Smells great, babe," he mumbled, digging in. I watched him eat, a knot forming in my stomach. I loved Dylan, but the constant tension with his mother was wearing me down. After breakfast, I settled into my home office, ready to tackle the day's tasks. The familiar hum of my computer was comforting, a reminder that I was good at what I did, even if Brenda refused to see it. Halfway through my first meeting, I received another text from Brenda. "Have you done the laundry yet? Dylan needs his favorite shirt for tomorrow." I gritted my teeth and replied politely, "I will get to it after my meetings, Brenda." She responded almost instantly, "Meetings? You mean your pretend work? Dylan needs that shirt, Lara." Brenda had moved in with us shortly after our wedding, claiming she needed support due to her health issues. At first, I was supportive, believing that it was an opportunity to build a strong family bond. However, Brenda saw me as a rival, someone who had taken her son away from her. Every day, she would criticize my work, dismissing it as trivial. One morning, I was deep into a conference call when Brenda barged into my home office. "Lara, when are you going to get a real job?" she snapped, ignoring the fact that I was clearly busy. "You can't expect Dylan to support you forever." I muted the call and took a deep breath. "Brenda, I've told you before, I do have a real job. I work for a multinational company, and my work is important." "Hemph," she scoffed. "Sitting in front of a computer all day isn't real work. You're just wasting time." Before I could respond, Dylan walked in, looking between us with a confused expression. "What's going on?" "Your wife thinks playing on the computer is a real job," Brenda said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Dylan, you know what I do is serious work," I said, looking at him for support. Dylan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mom, Lara's job is important. Just try to respect that, okay?" Brenda huffed and left the room, but not before muttering, "Back in my day, we knew what hard work was." The day passed in a blur of conference calls and project updates. By the time Dylan came home from work, I was exhausted. We sat down to dinner, and as we ate, he brought up a topic that had been on my mind for weeks. "So, I was thinking we could finally take that overseas trip we've been talking about," he said, looking at me expectantly. I hesitated. The idea of a vacation was appealing, but the thought of spending it with Brenda was not. "Wouldn't it be nice to have some time just for us?" I suggested carefully. Dylan frowned. "Mom's been looking forward to this too, Lara. She hasn't had a vacation in years. Besides, it'll be good for us to spend some time together as a family." I bit my tongue, not wanting to argue. Instead, I nodded and forced a smile. "Okay, let's do it." Little did I know, That decision would change everything. The weeks leading up to the trip were a whirlwind of preparations. I meticulously planned every detail, from booking flights and hotels to creating an itinerary that would keep Brenda entertained. Dylan, as usual, left everything to me, trusting that I would handle it all. On the day of our departure, the airport was a chaotic sea of travelers. Brenda, with her perfectly coiffed hair and designer luggage, stood out like a sore thumb. She barely acknowledged me as we navigated through security and found our gate. The flight was uneventful, though Brenda's constant complaints about the food and the service grated on my nerves. Dylan, ever the peacemaker, tried to keep things light, but I could see the strain in his eyes. When we finally arrived at our destination, a picturesque seaside town, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this trip could be a turning point. But my optimism was short-lived. "Why are we staying in a hotel?" Brenda asked, her voice dripping with disdain as we checked in. "I thought we were renting a villa." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 before responding. "The hotel has better amenities, Brenda. I thought it would be more comfortable for all of us." She huffed, clearly unimpressed. Dylan shot me an apologetic glance, but said nothing. On the second night, we dined at a quaint, family-run restaurant. Brenda scrutinized the menu with a disdainful look, her lips pursed in disapproval. "Why would you choose a place like this, Laura? This food looks unsanitary." "It's a highly recommended local spot, Brenda. I thought we could experience some authentic cuisine," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. Dylan glanced between us, clearly uncomfortable. "Mom, give it a chance. It's part of the adventure." Brenda huffed but didn't argue further. The meal was delicious, but I barely tasted it, too aware of the simmering tension at the table. The days that followed were a blur of sightseeing and tension. No matter what I did, it was never good enough for Brenda. She complained about everything: the food, the weather, the activities I had planned. One afternoon, while Dylan was out exploring the town, Brenda cornered me in the hotel lobby. "You're still as useless as ever, Laura," she spat. "This trip was supposed to be about bonding, but all you've done is ruin it. You have no place here. Go home." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I felt tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I squared my shoulders and looked her in the eye. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll leave." I packed my bags and left the hotel without saying goodbye to Dylan. As I sat in the taxi on the way to the airport, a strange sense of relief washed over me. I was done trying to please Brenda. I was done being treated like I didn't matter. Back in the US, I took a deep breath of the familiar air. I had made arrangements with my parents to join them on a luxury trip in upstate New York, something we had planned long before the ill-fated overseas trip with Dylan and Brenda. Meeting up with my parents at the hotel felt like a balm to my soul. They were surprised to see me earlier than expected, but welcomed me with open arms. We spent the next few days exploring scenic routes, enjoying gourmet meals, and catching up on lost time. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace in the hotel's cozy lounge, I told them everything. About Brenda's constant criticism, Dylan's inability to stand up for me, and my decision to leave them behind. "I'm proud of you, Lara," my mother said, squeezing my hand. "You deserve so much better." My father's expression was stern but kind. "What are you going to do now?" I reached into my bag and pulled out the divorce papers Dylan had thrown at me months ago. "I'm going to file these," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done being treated like I'm worthless." The following day, I went to the courthouse and filed for divorce. The process was surprisingly quick, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil I had endured. With the papers submitted, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. As I settled into my new life, I couldn't help but wonder how Dylan and Brenda were faring. I knew they would struggle without me to handle everything, but I couldn't bring myself to feel guilty. They had brought this upon themselves. Weeks later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was the U.S. Embassy, informing me that Dylan and Brenda had been robbed and stranded overseas. They needed my help to return home. Why should I help them? I asked, my voice calm. I'm no longer married to Dylan. They are not my responsibility. The embassy official was sympathetic but firm. They have no one else to turn to. I thought about it for a moment, then sighed. Fine, I'll arrange a business class flight for them. But that's it. I won't be there to pick them up. I used my connections to secure their tickets and sent the details to the embassy. Then, I turned off my phone and focused on my new beginning. Back in the States, Dylan and Brenda's return was anything but triumphant. They had lost everything: money, passports, valuables. Dylan's father helped them get back on their feet, but it was clear they were struggling. I learned through mutual acquaintances that Dylan was working multiple jobs to pay off debts, including those incurred by Brenda's extravagant beauty treatments. They had moved into a rundown apartment, a far cry from the life they had once flaunted. Despite everything, Brenda refused to change. She continued her beauty treatments, leaving Dylan to bear the brunt of their financial woes. As I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, overlooking the city skyline, I felt a sense of peace. I had made the right choice. I was free from the toxic cycle of criticism and unappreciation. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly happy. As the weeks turned into months, I slowly began to rebuild my life. I took up painting, losing myself in the colors and textures on the canvas. I joined a cooking class, discovering a passion for creating delicious dishes. I even started volunteering at a local shelter, finding joy in helping others. Dylan and Brenda were part of my past, and I was ready to move forward. I decided to celebrate this newfound freedom with a trip, something I had always dreamed of, but never had the chance to do. Italy had always called to me, with its rich history, stunning landscapes, and delectable cuisine. I booked a flight, packed my bags, and soon found myself wandering the cobblestone streets of Rome. The city's vibrant energy was intoxicating, and I spent my days exploring ancient ruins, sipping espresso in quaint cafes, and indulging in mouth-watering pasta dishes. One afternoon, as I sat in a bustling piazza sketching the scene before me, a friendly voice interrupted my thoughts. "That's a beautiful drawing," a man said, his accent unmistakably Italian. I looked up to see a handsome man with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Thank you," I said, blushing slightly. "I'm just a beginner." "You're very talented," he insisted, sitting down beside me. "I'm Marco, by the way." "Laura," I replied, shaking his hand. Over the next few days, Marco and I became fast friends. He showed me around the city, sharing its hidden gems and local secrets. We laughed, talked, and enjoyed each other's company, a connection blossoming between us. One evening, as we watched the sunset from a rooftop terrace, Marco turned to me, his expression serious. "Laura, I know we've just met, but I feel a strong connection with you. I don't want to rush things, but I also don't want to let this go." I looked into his eyes, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I feel it too, Marco. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm open to finding out." As my trip came to an end, I realized how much I had grown. I returned to the States with a renewed sense of purpose and a heart full of hope. Marco and I kept in touch, our bond growing stronger despite the distance. Back home, I continued to embrace my passions and newfound independence. I even held my first art exhibit, showcasing the paintings I had created during my journey. The gallery was filled with friends, family, and colleagues, all there to support me. As I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the fruits of my labor, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. I had faced my fears, overcome my struggles, and emerged stronger than ever. One day, as I was preparing for my next volunteer shift, I received a message from Marco. "I have a surprise for you," it read. "Check your front door." Curious, I opened the door to find Marco standing there, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. "Marco, what are you doing here?" I exclaimed, overjoyed. "I couldn't stay away," he said, grinning. "I want to be with you, Lyra. I want us to build a life together." Tears of happiness filled my eyes as I hugged him tightly. "I want that too, Marco," I said, feeling a sense of completeness I had never known before. As we walked hand in hand through the park later that day, I realized that this was my new beginning. I had found strength within myself, reconnected with my passions, and opened my heart to love once more. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. And this time, I was determined to make it a beautiful, fulfilling adventure.